Hello everyone and welcome to the virtual campus.
The scholars, the alumni, the fellows, it's such an amazing tribe to be part of.
I think marketing in many quarters is brilliantly practiced, in many other quarters is uselessly practiced. The point is we can learn from the good and also from the bad.
Every single client always has the first question. We want to have a very difficult conversation around race, but we don't know where to start.
Marketability, salability is an intrinsic part of creating product value.
The thing is that you want to learn, you will remember it far more if you learn that thing with the intention of sharing it with somebody else.
Athletes would think we're insane. An athlete would never expect to not look after their body, yet turn up and win a race. And we are no different, because this thing here is the thing that has to turn up every day.
Hello everybody and welcome to today's virtual campus session. I'm Emma Bird, Programme Director for the virtual campus here at the Marketing Academy. And before we kick off with the session, I've just got a few quick updates to share with you. Firstly, hopefully you've seen our comms on the learning journeys. This is an exciting development for the virtual campus, taking on board the feedback that our community have shared around where you start with the content. So we have curated a number of learning journeys, which you can work through some of the really amazing on-demand content that we've got. So if you haven't already, log into the hub and check out those learning journeys. We've also got some really great live sessions coming up. So next up, we have Find Your North Star session with Jeff Tan. So in this session, you will get the chance to design your own personal mission statement. Lots of registrations already for that, so make sure you sign up. And then in November, we've also got Fleur Marks joining us to help us live life fully despite the crazy shit show. That's going to be a really interesting session. Fleur's had a real journey over the last few years with her health, and this is all around how you can live life fully. There's also loads of new on-demand sessions. I haven't got time to talk to you about all of them. Some of the highlights are a fireside chat that Sherilyn had with Jonathan Milden Hall, an imposter syndrome session with Alistair Haar, and then an introduction to AI. So make sure you log in and check out those sessions. So without further ado, I want to introduce to you Lynn Frost. Lynn is the Managing Director at The Social Element and has worked with some of the biggest brands in the world, but she is proudly dyslexic, and she's a supporter of Made by Dyslexia, an organisation who work with schools and employers to ensure that people who are dyslexic are enabled to release their superpowers. And today she's here to talk to us just about that. So how we can all harness the superpower that is dyslexic thinking. So Lynn, if you want to come back on camera, I'm going to shortly hand over to you. The session today is being recorded and the slides will be available on the hub afterwards. And Lynn and I will have some questions at the end of the session. So Lynn, without further ado, I'm going to hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited to share this topic with you. It's actually incredibly personal to me, recently I was actually at a marketing roundtable, and we were talking about what's really important, supporting the brand or sales, that direct piece. And I listened to everybody talking, and I just realized that creativity and spontaneity and going with your gut instinct is slowly being eradicated out of the process, the best practice process. And I actually said to everybody, don't you just want to go with a great idea or and just know that it's the right thing to do? And everyone stared at me in shock and horror that I wouldn't find evidence and testing. And sometimes that strips away the magic of creativity. So I really wanted to do this today just to talk about what dyslexic thinking is and how we can all use it as a superpower. So I will go on to a bit about me, actually, because this really explains my journey with my own dyslexia, and also how my career has been defined by it. So from the age of 9, I wanted to work in advertising, which sounds a bit bizarre. But I actually watched a documentary, and it was around the Spastic Society. And they wanted to, the word spastic was quite derogatory, and it was being used in playgrounds. And they wanted to move into a positive space. So they brought in their advertising agency, and they solved the problem. And I watched people around the table brainstorming, or ideating as we call it now, and I just felt so excited, and I knew that was what I wanted to do. I wanted to be the person in the room solving problems through creativity. So I just set my sights on that at a very early age. Ogilvy, I looked at the people that were doing it, and I got very excited about Ogilvy, but I knew that I wouldn't get through on the grad program. So at school, like most people with dyslexia, you start realizing at around the age of 4 that you're finding reading difficult. You're learning in a slightly different way. So actually the academic path doesn't really lend itself to how I learn. So I knew that I wouldn't necessarily get onto the grad program, because I didn't actually finish my degree, because I found writing essays incredibly stressful. So I actually went into a work experience route. So I actually got to be there in person. I worked on a pitch. I was my full self in terms of, I actually did an amazing vox pops where I hit the streets and I asked people lots of questions about the product, and that enabled them to win the pitch. So I actually got in through that. So it was through me finding a way around the skills that I don't have, to then get myself into an industry that I knew was the right place for me, because I was so passionate about creativity. I've actually got twins. So I had twins in 2009. Now, again, that's something that you really need to think differently to survive. One of my most favourite brands that I worked with was actually the British Army. I wouldn't have necessarily thought it would be my favourite, but it was, because there was a story to tell. I got to go in, I spent 2 years with them, actually looking after their social. So it was building their brand through social. But the reason why I was so successful and why I enjoyed it is because my role was to go and find stories, and actually it was the beginning of the belonging strategy, which they're still using today. So I used my skills to go and find the stories and bring that emotional side of the army to life. And then this is most recent picture of me on the top right is my times. I started at the Social Element a year and a half ago, and I'm building an Avengers team. So it was coming in and actually saying, what does an agency of the future look like? And using my skills to then look to the future, which I can actually see so vividly, I can touch it, and then bringing in a team of Avengers alongside me. And my main thing here is bringing people around me that have the expertise that I don't, and those skills. So I've deliberately put in some blank grey boxes, because my world does not think like this, but it also reminds me to pause, because I'm incredibly fast paced. And I've created sort of 3 to 4 clear sections of this story to share with you. So starting with, what is dyslexia? What is that superpower? Why is it so important? So we have to start with the brain. Now, like everything in society, or lots of things, we have decided, we set this up years ago, right back at Victorian times, and even pre that, that there is one way to do things. There is the normal. There is the way that the brain is wired. And if your brain is wired slightly differently, you are not normal, and then you're at a disability. So what I want to talk about today is actually, well, we know that's not the case, but let's reframe that actually the brain is wired in many different ways, and we have many different types of brilliance and genius. And it's about recognizing it not as a disability, but actually as an ability. So I tried my hardest to find a visualization of my brain, and this felt like the one. So this is about celebrating how something is different, and understanding why that can be so powerful, and not being so concerned with the things that you can't do, because I'll talk about this as my journey later, is that from an early age, if you have dyslexia, you're basically told that you can't. You are made to feel incredibly inadequate, and your whole early stages of learning, you are at a disadvantage. And rather than looking at, well, actually, what the advantage is, it's very focused on the disadvantage, and that's how you sort of start your journey into education and learning and being who you are. So it starts on a very negative path, and you feel like you're struggling, and you're struggling the whole time. So this is about flipping that narrative and enabling people to understand that we're not all the same. We are not wired the same, and nor should we, because that's the genius part of everybody being slightly different and how we build from there. Even the word dyslexia is hard to spell. I can't spell it. I think one of the key myths to dispel right now is that dyslexia is somebody who can't read well or write, because that's just one small part of it. And let's add dyslexic thinking to that phrase. Even when you look now on chatbot, you talk about dyslexia and it comes up with disadvantage. They overcame all of the language of negativity, which needs to be banished. So let's start with those superpowers. Now, I'm here today to tell you that everybody can have these superpowers. It just, somebody with dyslexia, their brain is wired in a way that they find this easy. So going back to being a child that was struggling, the silver lining is that I knew there were some things that I found much easier than other people. So if you asked me to come up with an image, a visual, a concept, be creative, I excelled. So I had areas where I knew I could do something incredibly well. One of the first things about being dyslexic and having those superpowers is that you can see the bigger picture. You can see the wood from the trees. This is probably the best visualization of it, that you can really look above and look out and see beyond what is the now and what is that thing that you're being asked to solve. We think in visuals and imagery. There is no coincidence that my whole presentation to you today is done in visuals. I actually find that creating my story, my narrative, using the right imagery rather than words means I can unlock what I want to say much more quickly and easier and convey the story. If you ask me to write it, so writing an essay or a long piece of text, it will take me hours of procrastination, fear and worry that I just won't be able to tell you in words what I have in my head. And that's one of the things with dyslexia. You can see something so clearly and it's so magnificent, but you don't always have the skills to translate it onto paper or to make it a reality. Just talking about that visualization piece, if you give me a blank sheet of paper, and if you give somebody with dyslexic thinking a blank sheet of paper, that is exciting. That is not scary, because we can quickly visualize what will sit on that paper and we can fill it. So I actually find if I need to reset, if I'm struggling with something and I can't unlock it, I will literally get out a huge blank sheet of paper and I will start drawing, because drawing and visualization is my way of unlocking that solution. I had to put this in here. So and lots of people with dyslexic thinking have this ability. We can very quickly picture what something will look like. So often you'll find architects and interior designers and fashion designers have those skills, because I can very quickly tell you that it will be this cushion with this velvet, with this picture, because I can see it. I don't even need to start drawing it around. I can actually quite definitively know what something will look like. Something that's quite frustrating when you work with me is that I will get to a solution incredibly quickly. So when I was actually working with a product team and they were very set on agile, where you can't actually define the outcome, you have to say what you want to achieve and then find the right method to get there. So I'd get incredibly frustrated with it, and the analogy I would use was making a cup of tea. I know I want a cup of tea in a china cup. I can tell you the color of the china I would like and the shade of the tea. And they would get frustrated with me because they're saying, but Lynn, that's the solution, not the problem. We need to find the solution and we need to work out which vessel we need to boil the water, which porcelain cup is going to be the best for the temperature, and which color and which shade of tea is tasty. Now, so we will be at loggerheads with each other, because I'm like, well, you're wasting lots and lots of time for that outcome that I know is going to be right. And I'm the hare zooming to get there, and I often need people to slow me down or support me with the detail, or ideally keep up with me. Talking about the wood for the trees, we love a complicated challenge and a problem. If somebody, particularly for me in marketing, around a brand challenge or a business challenge, I get incredibly excited, and I'll start simplifying. That's the first part. So that's one of those key superpowers, is make the complex simple, because if it's simple, it's easily understood, and you can find a solution and you can make it happen. Following on to that next slide, and I couldn't think of a better object to describe that Rubik's Cube. So I said, if it feels like a challenge and it's unsolvable, that will get me flowing and get me really, really excited, because I know there will be a problem, there'll be a solution, and I know that I'll be able to find it. We seek the gaps. So gaps are opportunities. And I know early on in my career, somebody said to me, find the gap. So look at what's happening. So this is when I was back at Ogilvy, and you're an account executive and you're pretty powerless as an account executive. And I was a bit disappointed because I was going in with my big ideas and my skills. And then I quite realized in client service that actually that's not what they're looking for. They want you to do a lot of the admin, and the creatives do the creative idea, and the strategists do the strategy. So at the beginning of my career, I was incredibly frustrated, and I actually questioned my whole existence. Well, why am I here? Because admin is not my strong point. And it was the best piece of advice was, find the gap, Lynn, find the area that you can own to make a difference. And at the time, it was always the audience knowledge or the brand knowledge. So I made sure that I became the expert in the room on the audience. I loved going to talk to people. I loved learning. Or I'd be the expert in the room on the brand. So I would be there to provide knowledge that no one else was really thinking about. So it's, what's that gap? How can I own it? And how can I make a difference? Going back to that blank sheet of paper, I'm very quickly, I can join up the dots so that I'm creating not only the vision of what it looks like, but the roadmap to get there and the simplest path that would enable us to do it. So again, I've just discovered magnetic whiteboards that you can stick on your wall. They're just sheets of plastic. I fill a whole room with them. So it's a bit like the Beautiful Mind, where I'm literally just drawing out. It also means I'm not going to miss anything. I'm not going to miss something that would be really smart and simple that could solve the problem. This is my favorite slide. I've put it down to dyslexic thinking and superpowers, but it may not be, it might just be who I am, but it does fit with my profile and how I work and the other dyslexics that I know. When something is right, when I've solved the problem and when I've worked through something, I get this feeling of magic in my stomach. I cannot describe it. I have it now that I'm sharing this story with you. I know if I have that feeling that I am right, and I have to stick to my instincts to make sure that it happens. So in the world that I'm in marketing, so in an agency or client side, because I've done both, that feeling can sometimes be eroded away because people want structure, they want evidence, they want rational belief, they want to test it, they want to go out, they ask people questions. And that means sometimes that magic disappears or gets diluted. So that thing that you know is so spectacularly amazing becomes duller and duller and more predictable and more generic and more the same. The radiator has to be in here. Radiators, not drains. One of the skills of a dyslexic is that ability to communicate, to unite people and to build teams and be that force of energy in the room. I pride myself on being immensely positive, always looking on the upside and, okay, something's happened. Yes, it's rubbish. What have we learned? Let's move on and let's make it better. So always radiating that energy. Telling stories, it's the thing that it's one of the superpowers, and it's so incredibly important. I particularly learned this when I was client side, that I had to tell my story constantly and consistently. I was telling my story to the board. I was telling it to the level below that. I was telling it to the other departments. I was defending my story. So honing the ability to tell a captivating story visually is an immense skill. And it can be the difference between something being amazing and something being quite mundane, or even something happening. Because if you can tell your story and you can sell it, and you enable people to visualize it like you can, they will get excited and it will happen. One of my favorite, this is Audrey Hepburn. I've decided that she definitely had dyslexic superpowers, but it's going back to that, be positive. She's got this amazing saying around, like, don't ever regret the things that made you smile. So that just goes back to find the magic, protect it, and make it happen, and use your skills to sell it in because you know it's right. And don't let people putting those parameters and guardrails in that you don't feel comfortable with taking it away. I have to end on this slide because one of the things, and it may be because of a journey a dyslexic goes on, so from the age of 4 to probably actually throughout school, you're made to feel pretty inadequate. You are acutely aware of the things that you can and you can't do. I'll never forget wanting to spell clothing and being I just couldn't get over that. I couldn't spell it in the story that I wanted to tell. And I remember looking at people's labels on their clothes in case it had the word clothing, so I could spell it correctly. Everything you do, it's marked in red, or Lynn can't do this, Lynn can't do that, there's something wrong with Lynn. And you hear it on a constant basis. So you are acutely aware of the things that you are missing. So we are brilliant at building teams that complete a cycle of skills, because we will actively seek the skills that we are missing, because we know that will be a high performing team, and then we can do what we do best. So what are the things in the world that we wouldn't have without dyslexic thinking, and also the things that I admire and I'm drawn to because I can see the genius within it? It's debatable, but apparently Pablo Picasso was dyslexic and had dyslexic superpowers. And you can see this by his ability to see things differently, to have a clear picture, to put things together. Steven Spielberg credits his dyslexic thinking to his vivid imagination and how he told stories. He really struggled at school, so he knew to get by, he had to tell a compelling and amazing story visually well. And you can see that in everything that he creates. Tommy Hilfiger really struggled with reading and writing, so he took machine course. He did practical skills at school, so that's why he's famous for his clothing being incredibly well made, because that was his way to bring to life what he was passionate about. One of my favorite TED Talks ever is the Simon Sinek one around the why, and why is Apple more successful than Microsoft? And it's very simple. It's beautiful, simply designed. Steve Jobs used his dyslexia to make something incredibly simple. It was so beautiful and so amazing, and to create innovative products that people hadn't even thought about. And it's to create products that existed, but he made them even better. Richard Branson, it was one of the reasons I was so excited that I got to work at Virgin for 3 years, because for me, he was that ultimate person. I grew up in the 80s and 90s. I admired the way that he thought and the way that he spotted a gap. So airlines, not much competition here. They're a bit rubbish. I can make it better. And he sought out simple changes, but also crazy ones, like being the first people to have choc ices on board. Why not? He's somebody that continually throughout his career has said, why not? Let's do it. And there is nothing more powerful than that. So it's that, I think I might want to do something. Always say, well, why can't it happen? So he's that original disruptor. Lots of people have caught up today, but that is how he built his whole empire and his whole ethos. Cadbury's Gorilla, I had to put an advertising example in here. Now, the creative director was actually on another shoot, and they were thinking about, they were going to work on Cadbury's. And he just said, what about if we think about the feeling that eating that chocolate makes? And but that's a bit mad, because, well, what about the strategic narrative? What about telling people about the ingredients? What about the rational reason why they should believe? But he was so convinced by his instinct that this would be amazing, this would be different, that he made it happen. And he sold that vision in, and they looked for what type of gorillas and how we're going to make it work. And everybody was so blown away by, it was mad, unexpected, but also joyful. It brought everybody joy. And you remembered Cadbury's. So it completely did its job, but would not have happened without that, just thinking slightly differently and telling people about your vision and staying true to it and ensuring that it happened. I have to talk about sort of founder. So Nick Jones, Soho House founder, proudly dyslexic and a big supporter of Made by Dyslexia. And he credits his dyslexia. It goes back to that simplification. I talk about it later, how he sort of redefined the marketing P's around it was his passion and it's his ability to simplify and to create a product, a club that people really want to be part of. And when you are a member and you're there, you can see there is no fine detail that hasn't been thought through. Jamie Oliver, again, back when he began, he credits his passion for food and people and training for his success. Very simply, and that's what he did incredibly well. So 15 would never have happened if it hadn't been for Jamie saying, well, I love food. I've completely struggled at school. Food was the thing that I was really, really good at because it was practical. So why don't I gather other people that are struggling and teach them a skill and enable them to be the best at what they do? And we loved 15. It was a completely revolutionary concept that people didn't think of at the time. And he wasn't deterred by somebody saying, well, no, you can't do that. Because he's like, absolutely, I can. And I'm going to. And then it went from strength to strength. Dyson is a classic and a good one. But again, it was a pure obsession with the bagless vacuum that drove James Dyson to be innovative and to create something new. And that is exactly what you still see through his product and innovation today. How can I take something and make it better through something that is incredibly clever and simple and aesthetically pleasing? I had to put Pip in here. You'll find that dyslexics are normally drawn to each other. She decided, so again, it's a very simple formula. LinkedIn, it has changed, it's evolved today, but it was very much a place for people wearing suits or very professional. And she was looking, she wanted to create something that had technology at its core, that was incredibly simple, but also motivating for those that didn't conform to the standard professional site that LinkedIn was offering, and she created the dots. She's also the first person, so I've been on this journey in the last 10 years, I would say, on me being confident and comfortable with who I am and my skills. And she was one of the first people I knew that put beautifully dyslexic on her footer. So I know that I'm likely to misspell something multiple times. I'm likely to be grammatically incorrect. I read something and I can't actually see the mistake. So it's quite important that I put something on there to explain to people. It's not because I'm careless. It's not because I don't care. It's because I genuinely see things differently. So she is somebody that I really admire and that made me think to myself, actually, you're bloody brilliant. I want to be like you. And yes, we should be celebrating this. Another brilliant fact when I was doing my research around dyslexic thinking is the founder of IKEA, because he struggled with numbers, he couldn't remember product numbers, he actually therefore gave the furniture memorable Swedish names so he could remember his product range. That for me is the fabric of IKEA. It's something it's really incredibly famous for and touching. He also, because he struggled with written instructions, which is something when you're dyslexic, you're normally not brilliant at, he was the first people to create visuals for the guides on how to make something, which has now been widely used. So again, it was that thinking around something to solve it, then can create something brilliant and unique and actually really engaging and interesting. And then the final example is actually one of my own. So going back to knowing your solution quite quickly, thinking about, well, what's happening around me? What's happening in the environment? So when I was at Virgin Red as the marketing director at Virgin Red, we actually were going to launch and then COVID happened. So we were planning to launch. We had everything ready to go. Literally the week after COVID happened, so we paused our launch because we're an entertainment product and it's all about getting out and about. So it felt very tone deaf and didn't feel appropriate to be talking about that at that time. So we completely pivoted, recreated our campaign. And then I just had this real desire. What if there was an ice cream truck or a truck that arrived at a time when it had on board exactly what you needed and wanted. So very simply, ice cream in a summer, but you could be at a festival and it's got sparkles, or you're at in the winter, it's giving you hot chocolate. So it was simple things, but it was being there and giving you what you need, wanted, and loved the most at a time when you needed it. So we had the Grin in the Daily Grind truck. So it was, let's disrupt the daily grind with magic and things that people want, because that was the whole heart and the core of Virgin Red. And I had the ice cream truck, and then it became, and we worked with the PR agency, and then it became the floating ice cream truck. And this was an idea, and it came to life. So I actually had something that was something we came to very, very quickly as an idea, and I actually had it visualized, actually became a reality. And I say this now, that I would have, in hindsight, I would have put all of my marketing budget on this, because it was the one moment which brought the brand to life. And we had a competition where we were giving away 1 million points. And again, people were talking about our products and they were getting involved. And it was one of those perfect things that came together that makes me realize today, if I have an idea and I truly believe in it, make it happen. So why is it so important as marketeers that we have a balance on rational thinking versus emotional? And I think it couldn't be more important today, because for me, TV advertising, as I said, it was something that I loved so much from such an early age. We used to play Guess the Advert as a family. Like, advertising was such a fabric binding thing. And if you talk to anyone that's grown up in this period, we are bonded by remembering those jingles, remembering the madness, not knowing what was happening next, because you were engaged and entertained. Sadly, link testing, the desire to show your product within the first second, having to be incredibly rational with your story, shoehorning all of your RTBs in, has stripped away that magic and that adjectivity and that beautiful creative thinking. So we need to make sure that we still harness that, because it's proven time and time again that if your customer has an emotional attachment, a positive one, to your brand or to your product, they are 75% more likely to buy it again. They're going to talk about it, they're going to refer, and it drives that loyalty. So it's also not a coincidence that 40% of self-made millionaires are dyslexic. It's a similar stat for the makeup of the Dragon's Den panel. So it's proven that dyslexic thinking fuels and powers businesses. So yes, it's creativity here, but profit happens because creativity, something that is needed and wanted and loved, will ultimately be successful. So what do you guys need to do? Always ask, what if? What if that happened? Don't be frightened to scenario plan, and be a bit wild. Why not? Why not is the most powerful two words. I'd also say, why? Why do people care? But why not? If you think about something and it feels mad and it goes against all of the rules and the preconceptions and the things that we are taught to believe, always say, why not? And normally you can probably rationalize and go through all of those reasons to get to the reasons why it's actually a good idea. Picture it. So I can only see in a certain way. I've been born this way, and I know that I have these visualization skills. I'm assuming that others don't. But even if you don't, try and picture what something is like. We do a lot of visualization exercises. I just had an offsite last week where everyone shut their eyes, and we made people race forward 3 years from now. And it's literally close your eyes and try and imagine what something looks like, feels like, even tastes like, because that will make you realize it, and then it will happen. It goes in sort of the rules of manifestation. Let the plan change. I drive people insane who work with me. I've done a lot of disc work recently, and you've got the people that like the evidence, the facts, they take time to digest. As I mentioned, I'm quite aware that I drive them a bit mad, and they drive me equally madder. The plan can change. If you're on a course and and this goes back to evidence, which everyone loves, the evidence or the weather or whatever the parameters are changing, change your plan. It's incredibly important that you are fluid and you are able to join up those dots, because rigid plans don't get you to something that is amazing. I mean, it can get you to something, but it won't have that level of amazing to it. Don't be frightened to break the rules. I think I've mentioned it a few times. I actually don't believe that the rules apply to me, which I know can massively scare people, but I genuinely don't. If I can get around the, well, why, the why not, and I can see it, and I don't think it's going to harm anybody or nobody's going to die, or it's not going to be, like, as I said, within the realms of kindness, why shouldn't we break those rules? Rules are made to be broken. Society gives us rules to keep us in a lane, like the way that we decide that everything has to be the same and everyone one model fits all. It's not true. So if you can find something that will break a rule for a really good reason and actually potentially create something even more exciting, go for it. See what will happen, and you might surprise yourselves. Keep things simple. Every single example I've shared with you is passion, focus, simplicity. So Apple, simply beautiful. Dyson, simply clever. Richard Branson, simply boldly brave. Everything has simplicity at its core, because that means it's easily understood and it works. You don't need to overcomplicate things. If something's full of jargon, it's overcomplicated, it's probably a bad idea. So it's always look for the simplest, most efficient route through. Find the right people. So know your strengths and weaknesses and find the people that will complement you. Don't judge your team by something that they can't do. Instead, look at what they can do and then work out if you can fill in those gaps. For me, squads work really well, pod working. Understand your challenge, then think, well, what skills and what people and what expertise do I need to fix it, and build that team so that they are working together to solve that problem. And as Nick says, put your P's in the right order. Passion, number one. So every single dyslexic person that I have met, and myself included, we are passionate about what we are doing, and we truly believe passion should be your number one priority. People, you need the people, you need to motivate them, you need that to make things happen. Your product needs to be sound, but the difference between you with a product, you can have the same product, but if you've got the passion and the people and the other people don't, you will do better, you will succeed, and then profit will follow. Profit, this probably shouldn't be in an order, because profit's obviously important, because profit means you can do more amazing things, but in order of your priority and where you're starting with your plan, if you've nailed the passion, you've got a simple idea, you've got the people to make it happen, a good product, profit will happen. You don't want to start with profit, because you won't have the rest of those things and it won't work. You won't have that longevity. So ending on, actually, there is so many people that have dyslexic thinking. There's also other neurodiverse powers. So it's, what do I do? How do I harness that power? So we talked about that. So this is about, okay, if my child is dyslexic, or I might be dyslexic, there's a lot of people that have never been diagnosed. It wasn't recognized in schools. What do I do? So I've actually approached this from going back to talking to me. So this is me in 1987. I'm 7 years old. That's probably, the expression on my face is probably reflective of my time at school. I did not have a good time at school. I struggled. As I mentioned, I was, as soon as they realize you struggle with reading and writing, you're put into special needs or a special set. And that the way that you're taught doesn't factor in your brilliance at all. So you are constantly made to feel inadequate. You have such low self-esteem. And actually how you're taught and the things that you do, and it hasn't changed much today, sadly, doesn't lend itself to you feeling satisfied with yourself or what you're doing. So I was incredibly miserable. I really struggled, and I really questioned, well, what am I here for? Who am I? My self-esteem was at rock bottom, and pretty much was until I was 17 when I went to art college, where everything flipped, because at art college, everything was geared towards the things that I was really good at. And I realized that actually I could be incredibly successful, because I always knew that I would. It was just that everything around me was telling me that I wasn't. So this would be my advice to anybody that thinks they may be dyslexic or have children. So my son is dyslexic. And actually it's even hard for me to keep him motivated within the current school system, because sadly, and I can't believe it, even with all of this new knowledge that we have and all of the progression that is made, children with dyslexia are still being treated in the same way. So if I could go back to 1987 and speak to myself, number one, Lynn, be proud of your dyslexia. Do what you're doing today. Create a forum where you can share your knowledge and your skills for good. Share how you like to work. This is probably one of my biggest tips. So with my team, I'll say to them, look, I talk to think. Don't give me great big long emails to read or great big documents to read, because that stresses me out. I did some judging a couple of years ago, and it was during COVID, and they literally paused. We were all on a virtual call, and they paused the judging so that we could read the submissions. And the submissions, I love submissions when they're videos, but it wasn't videos, it wasn't visual. And I was given these hefty case studies to read in a very short time frame. I literally had a meltdown, so much so that I excused myself from judging, because I just couldn't cope with the stress of consuming information at speed, because I just don't process that way. So I since fed back, and they've actually changed the judging system. So I now am very open with, you get the best out of me by sharing things visually, talking through it with me. I'm brilliant verbally, and it means I can absorb the information, because I need to. And also, if you're showing me something, let me do it myself, because I'll remember it. I'll process it that way. Find people that complement your skills. As I mentioned, I'm building a team around me that are bringing the expertise and the skills that I just don't have, but also complement mine. And I'm also seeking people that can have that empathy and understanding of, do you know what, Lynn's a bit crap at admin, but that's fine, because I've got her, because I'm on the details, so she doesn't need to be. And that's what it's about. It's about understanding each other's strengths, and then complementing and making sure you've got their backs, because you know that I'm rubbish at admin, I'm rubbish at following instructions, but actually I'll be there keeping that vision going. I will be the one in the room ensuring that we're going to get to that vision that we can see, and we're going to be successful. Ensure your environment is right. I'm very affected by my environment. So flexible working suits me immensely. I get bursts of energy, and bursts of concentration. So I struggle to concentrate if I'm in a big bank of desks with lots of people and lots going around. I know now that I used to be really good late at night. 3 o'clock in the morning was my favorite hour for genius moments of clarity. Now that I'm older, it's actually more 5 in the morning or early morning. But I need to make sure that I work at the time frames that suit me. I'm not rushed. I actually do work best under pressure, but it's making sure that I don't have lots of calls in the diary or interruptions. I like to do sprints. So it's making sure that I can go at something and I don't have to feel guilty about stopping. So I said to my team, if you get an email from me at 3 in the morning, I have started doing schedule send, but if you get something from me, don't feel sorry for me or worry that I'm working till that time. It's because I've had a moment of genius and I didn't want to stop. And then I'll know that I'll need to rest the next day. And then just know that whatever you're bringing to the table is valued. So all of these skills that I've talked about are the skills that are required for this emerging world. The World Economic Forum have recognized them, that actually machines are here, AI is here, and what we need are people that can think around problems, that actually can use the tech, because they can see through and they can be ahead of. So our skills, and even if you don't naturally have them, really training that muscle to have these skills is incredibly valued. And it's proven time and time again to lead to valued things. And then never forget your passion. So if you don't feel that passion, if you haven't got that gut feeling or that sense of joy that you've nailed something, then it's not right for you. And I've learned a lot about this, that I've been in roles that have shifted from brand. So brand is my thing that I love most. I get incredibly excited, because for me, a brand is like, it's like building a human. It's amazing. You can do all of this amazing stuff. Put me into a performance direct role with lots of data and lots of numbers, I will fail. So I will naturally choose the roles and choose the things that enable me to be passionate, because if I don't have that, I will be miserable and I will also fail. It's that margin between success and failure. And then never forget people and product. and passion, because not only does it lead to profit, but it leads to positive change. And then I'm just ending on my final visual, and I don't know if this is just me. This was almost my nirvana moment, but when I drive past Stonehenge, I just, my mind goes mad, and I instantly think around, how did they get the boulders there? It's crumbling. What can we do to protect it? I'm sure it was some dyslexic thinking that made this happen. And then there's nothing more beautiful than the rainbow, because it's that moment of magic and gold that just cuts through all of the grey and everything that we're doing. I'm going to end.
Wow, that was amazing. I can certainly see your superpower, Lynn. You've gone off camera though, so if you want to pop your camera back on, there we go. There she is. Brilliant. That was amazing. Love seeing all of the examples of the case studies there. Some really, really great examples. So we now have got some questions for you, a few different angles here, but I'm going to start with workplace stuff, because I know there'll be lots of people wanting to know the answer to this one. How can workplaces better support dyslexic thinking and hire more dyslexic talent?
There are lots of ways. I think the key thing is in the hiring process. So something that we've done at the Social Element, and also something that I encourage everybody to do, is look at the criteria that you're setting for your roles. So I know hands down that if the marketing director role for Virgin had gone out in a traditional sense, and I'd gone through that filtering process, applied through LinkedIn, I'd have been disqualified immediately, possibly, if they had put on there that you need to be degree educated, or you needed to have certain qualifications, or your experience. So my experience, and I think this is quite true to a lot of people with dyslexic thinking, is quite varied. And so you don't fit the norms that people will be looking for from a recruitment process. So it's relax your parameters of the people that you're looking for. Also think about what you're asking them to do before you meet them. So a written cover letter for me is hell. That's the worst thing you can ask me to do. So it's maybe ask them to get them to send in a video of themselves talking about something they're passionate about, or talking about their experience and their expertise, because you're enabling them that opportunity to, it also enables you as an employer that opportunity to meet a more diverse range of people.
And to see their creativity as well, rather than just to fill in a form. Great. And I've got a question. I'm managing someone who's terrible at admin and the detail side of things. How can I best support them?
Really good question. I would ask them how they work and what I think for me, it's really understanding what the challenge is. So it's possible that actually what you're asking them to do is overcomplicated. And it may be that they just will never do it. So for me, timesheets is something that I've never, even now, so it's quite funny, because I'm now at the MD, and it's so important to me that I understand time so that I can make profit. And I'm asking everyone to fill in this information, but I'm probably the worst offender in the land. So I've actually got an assistant that can help me do that. So I think it does depend on, and also the sad thing is that when you're lower down, as I sort of mentioned, being an account executive, those lower down roles often have a lot of the admin in them. So for me, it's a one-to-one conversation and really unpacking what the problem is, because then you can find a solution. So there may be some simple fixes that mean that they'll understand how to do it and why to do it and why it's so important.
Or to simplify it, as you said. You mentioned knowing your capabilities and finding people to complement them. How have you done that with your team and in your job?
Being very honest with myself. I sort of mentioned I've been on this journey of discovery. I had massive imposter syndrome. I actually, in between my roles, so leaving Virgin, so being client side for 3 years, going back into an agency environment, and I knew I was going in as this managing director. They'd never had one before, and they needed this very strong leader to come in. And I had this massive, massive wobble of, oh my God. So I actually got a coach, CK, who does entrepreneurial leadership training. So she helped me to understand my skills, the things that I would bring to the table that I should be incredibly confident about. And then, so by doing that work with her, we did a lot of strength work and value work. I could then quite quickly identify, well, actually, I'm never going to be good at this. I'm never going to achieve this. So I need to make sure when I arrive, I'm able to hire in or find the people in the organization that can support me with my gaps.
yeah, coaching can be really impactful in that sense, can't it? So slightly different angle now. What other neurodiverse qualities, for example, to talking about autism, how can that have an impact?
I think it's, I'm not an expert, so I think that's probably a key thing to say. But I think it's approaching it in the same way. So I know that I actually got it very, very wrong. I actually worked with somebody that did have neurodiverse, sort of not identified, but had been diagnosed as being autistic. And I really struggled. And I just didn't do that basic thing of asking them. I didn't ask them, how do you like to work? Like, how can I get the best out of you? What can I do to support? And I sort of talked about it in the talk. It's around their environment, their working hours, deadlines, expectations. So I think the number one thing that I've learned through getting it wrong, and even myself, who knows that I like to work in a certain way, I just forgot to ask, and I made loads of assumptions.
Definitely a good place to start. And what would you say has been the biggest change in how we support diversity since you've been in industry?
Positive.
Has it changed?
It has changed. As I sort of mentioned, I think in schools there's still a long way to go. I think organisations like Made by Dyslexia, who worked with LinkedIn to actually make dyslexic thinking an attribute, that's huge. That's massive. I think I like to think that we're not judging people so much on, you know, the whole eat, shoots and leaves thing, that you'd really go, well, they're an idiot. They're an idiot. They've spelt that incorrectly, or they're an idiot that they've got that wrong. I feel like we're more accommodating. I feel far less pressure. Also, judgment. I felt quite judged. I used to always be asked to be the person that wrote on the board, and I'd be petrified. And I'm like, oh God, they're going to uncover that I can't spell. And I feel that we're more accommodating. I do believe we're becoming more aware, and I do think we're valuing those skills more than we had done in the past.
Good. And then just leading on from that, do you have any advice for helping children in particular in schools who are struggling today?
Talk to them about superpowers, make them feel valued, praise them, try not to focus on everything that they're doing wrong. Again, you'd think I'd be amazing at this, being somebody that grew up and went through all of those challenges. I'm terrible with my son. I think I panic. I think, oh God, he's not going to succeed because he's not hitting these ideals. And I just have to remember, well, actually, he's really good at all of these other things. I sort of say that no one says my child is bad at art, I'm going to get them an art tutor. And that's what you've got to think, that if we change the parameters of how we measured being clever, or what we measured as being top, and we said, you know what, creative thinking, agility, if they were top, we'd have a whole completely different perspective. So I think it's around praise. It's around not letting them feel that they're inadequate, not letting them hear you be concerned about them. Because I think that's probably the main thing for me, is I was very good at listening, and I would hear something wrong with Lynn. And once you hear that, then your self-esteem just goes lower and lower and lower. So it's just make them be proud of the things that they're really good at.
Right, that's all we've got time for today. But thank you so much, Lynn. Really enjoyed the session. And if you're watching this on demand, make sure you leave your comments against the post so we can hear what you think. There's going to be some information on Made by Dyslexia at the bottom of the post. So if you've got any questions, either reach out to Lynn or feel free to check out those resources. And we'll see you again on the virtual campus very soon. Thanks, Lynn.